Another essential ingredient of good framing is gonna be depth. So you could enhance story in your image by creating additional depth in your image. And you can do it with multiple elements, or like you can do it in multiple ways. For example, you could use depth of field. So like, like you see in this case, what we have is the first plan, which is just a bit of a dune here, which is kind of blurred-ish. Then you have the sharp main feature of this render, which is the truck and this guy sitting on a sand resting against the wheel. And then you got blurred background with another guy standing over there, and that's, that creates depth. It gives you this perspective, sort of a feeling of relevance, or, you can just imagine a bit better the entire scenery, okay? Similar stuff here, guys. You have this slightly blurry foreground, then you have very sharp, this truck and these two guys here, I mean the chick and the guy. And then you have a bit more blurry background, and then really kind of like hazy and blurry, like a far horizon. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of depth. This is not an example, there are several layers in here, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 6, 7 layers. You have the planet at the back as well, and these ships flying over somewhere in the horizon. So creating depth gives you this insane sort of a storytelling element that tells you a bit more about, where this takes place, and also makes it more cinematic. So if you shoot images or you create renders and you, for instance, create some environments, this is a really good idea to try at least to create some depth to these images. Another example would be the sphere I showed you before, this one. It's the same story, right? You see that foreground is blurred here, and this part here in the middle, this one right here, that's actually sharp, plus the sphere, right? And then everything behind it from here till the end is blurred. But you've seen this is first plan is in the bottom here, so that's 1. Then you got 2, and then you got sort of a 3 at the back with some clouds. So if nothing was in here, it would be a bit dull. This gives you this perspective of how big the area is, how far the horizon goes, what's behind this dune, etc. Right? So this is a really good way of telling a bit more, giving a bit more to the story and enhancing it. Doesn't really take much of effort, because usually the far horizon is blurred, so you don't really have to pay attention to matching it very well. As long as you match the color and the perspective, you're good. It's really easy. Like for instance, the background here, the way I rendered this here, these dunes, all right, that was rendered in Blender. Okay, so the truck and the dunes and this guy, right, that was rendered in Blender. But this entire background here is just an image that I simply placed behind the layer of this truck. Another way of creating depth would be using color, and you could create depth by making the foreground a bit warmer and the background a bit colder, because the first color we will notice as humans is going to be a warm color, and the secondary color is always, a cold color. This is an interesting example. You have warm foreground, right? And then much colder background, which still stands out and looks pretty cool. But you'll first look here, and then you will look here. But you can see this kind of a feeling of depth is enhanced by the fact that, this is warmer and this is colder. And this is not a way of creating depth in images. So there are many ways you can achieve this effect. But if you create an environment, there's always a good idea to do that, because it will add much more drama and sort of like, it will enhance the story of whatever you're trying to sell. Another way of creating depth would be a very shallow depth of field and focus, kind of a strategic focus on a specific part. So when you have something that is facing the camera and goes deep into the scene, like this arm, it's really close to the camera, this head, but this arm is going deep inside of the image, then you can use a longer lens, let's say like maybe 200 mil, 135 millimeters, right, to create a low aperture, like let's say 1.4, f-stop, which will create a very small field of focus. We're going to be talking about field of focus later on, when we're going to be talking about focal length and lenses. But the trick is that the lower you go on aperture and the higher you go with focal length, the smaller is going to be the area of focus. So the area of focus here is really small. It's maybe that much, right? And then the focus starts falling off, okay? And you have, since this arm is going into the image, it becomes more and more blurry and more dreamy. So you're strategically focusing on one part here, and the rest of it goes into the image. And you can perceive depth by simply subconsciously noticing how fuzzy this becomes, how blurry it becomes. Deeper the deeper you go, the more fuzzy it becomes, right? So this is another way of creating depth, and it's really effective. But I see that people are overusing it. A lot of people don't really know how to use depth of field properly. They think it's just a cool effect. It's not a cool effect, it's a tool, and you really need to use it consciously and know where to use it and how to use it. So this is a good example of how to use depth of field and shallow depth of, shallow aperture, or wide open lens, because it's the same thing. But it's a very powerful tool if you know how to apply it to your images.